What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, your home for the 2020 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined by Daniel Starkand. Here we are on the eve, or not the eve, the precipice of Game 1 of the NLCS, Dodgers and Braves, a repeat of last year's NLCS. Tons to talk about, an interesting lineup out today, a bullpen game for the Dodgers. Daniel, we'll start with just the emotional level. How are we feeling?
It's a quick turnaround from the last series. I feel like, I guess we got one day off, but I feel like we just ended Game 5. I'm still kind of riding those emotions, and here we are in a brand new series, even back up 0-0. So tonight's a big one. I mean, I feel like tonight is not a must-win by any means for the Dodgers. Like you said, they're going with a bullpen game. The Braves have their ace on the mound. So if the Dodgers could find a way to steal this one, which is definitely possible, that'd be a big jump.
Yeah, we said the same thing last time,
sure.
with Webb on the mound for the Giants, that was a must win in Game 1 for them. They, of course, did go out and win that game. The Dodgers fell behind 1-0. So it's interesting. I agree with you. And I also agree, I don't feel like I'm mentally and emotionally prepared for another series to start yet. I don't feel like I know enough about the Braves or have invested enough time into this one because I'm still, recovering. It feels like I needed, a 36-hour nap just to get over Game 5 and having played the Giants. But the biggest storyline, Noah's asking about it, Hawaiian Kira's asking about it, is the bullpen. Today, the Dodgers make the decision to have a bullpen game. They have announced that Max Scherzer will pitch Game 2, Walker Buehler Game 3, Julio Urias Game 4. The decision to go with a bullpen game. Corey Knebel, he started Game 5. He starts Game 1 for the Dodgers. We've talked plenty about how great the Dodgers bullpen is. It'll be put to the test. A couple interesting roster moves we can talk about a little bit. As far as David Price not on the roster, your boy Billy McKinney no longer on the roster. But what do you make of this bullpen game? I mean, you said it's not really a must-win. Is that because of the bullpen? Do you feel like this is a disadvantage for the Dodgers?
I mean, anytime you're going up against the guy in Max Fried, who, statistically was one of the best pitchers in baseball in the second half, while your team has three really good starters and none of them are pitching. So I don't think the Dodgers are ever at a disadvantage personally, just because their bullpen is nasty. And I bet their record was even really good in bullpen games this year. So I wouldn't say they're at a disadvantage, but I just think this is a game you can afford to lose just because after this, you're going to be set up really well going forward. You're going to have your three guys go in the next three games. As far as, the decision to go with the bullpen game, I don't really think there even really was a decision to make. It really just came down to, is Max feeling good enough to pitch or not? And clearly the answer was no. So, and the other two guys, Buehler and Julio, they're also, on short rest. So they're not good to go today. So your hands were kind of tied there. So it's Corey Knebel to start off again, and then we'll see what happens from there. I think a lot of people are expecting Tony Gonsolin to pitch at some point. I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll see. Maybe they just decide to go straight bullpen game, 9 different guys, 9 innings, or maybe not exactly that, but they could afford to do that. Everyone's pretty well rested. Like you said, on the roster changes, they added, an extra pitcher. So if they wanted to go just a straight bullpen game, they could do that for sure. So it'll be interesting to see if the score dictates that, if they have a strict plan that they're going with. Feel like with Game 5 against the Giants, we kind of knew at least how it was going to go, sort of. Tonight.
Yeah, and Dave Roberts, I think, had a comment. He's comfortable with Tony Gonsolin throwing 60, 70 pitches. But, we also heard that he was going to pitch in Game 5, and he never pitched. So I think my guess is that Plan A is a scenario in which Tony Gonsolin gets them at least 3 innings. I think that would probably be their best case scenario. That's just my guess, where they can not have to burn through every arm in their bullpen, especially because, remember, it's potentially a 7-game series. So just like with the Giants, you don't want to have all of your... I mean, the Dodgers benefited in Game 5 from having seen Doval earlier in the series. So it's also the downside to a bullpen game in Game 1 is that if the Braves get a look at every single one of your relievers right in Game 1, then that could be problematic. So I think if they could get Gonsolin to at least get through the lineup one time by himself, that would sort of, everything else would be gravy. So interesting to see there. You mentioned, is this a must win, that kind of thing. Just looking up the odds, it's actually exactly even. Both teams are minus 105 to win. So if you want to know how Vegas views the Dodgers and how Vegas views the Braves have their best pitcher on the mound and at home, and the Dodgers have their worst pitcher, essentially, which is their bullpen, and coming off of a game 5, and they're on the road, having traveled across the country in the last 48 hours, and they are exactly even. So you can imagine what those lines will be when Max Scherzer is pitching, when Walker Buehler is pitching at home, when Julio Urias is pitching at home. So that gives you a sense of how good they think the Dodgers are compared to the Braves. Let's talk briefly about the roster decisions. We kind of hinted Evan Phillips, Justin Brule, both added to the roster. David Price taken off the roster. Billy McKinney taken off the roster. You predicted the Billy McKinney thing. I joked with you that I didn't think there was ever going to be a scenario where Dave Roberts would allow that to happen. Well, it did. I also made a comment about I wouldn't be surprised if David Price started a game in this series. He's not even on the roster, which is kind of what we predicted a long time ago. The Brule one makes sense to me because he's a lefty. The Braves struggle against lefties. And you and I also thought Phillips should have been on ahead of Gratterall a long time ago. So I imagine you like both of these moves. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. I mean, I think the McKinney for Brule was expected. We thought with a 7-game series with the 3 games in a row in the middle, you want to get an extra pitcher in there. Billy McKinney, completely expendable as far as I'm concerned. I know, like you said, the organization seems to love him, but they could deal without those 9th-inning defensive replacements, and he wasn't really bringing much else to the table. So yeah, I guess the interesting decision was taking off Price and going with Evan Phillips. Price was a guy who, like you said, he's a guy that we didn't think was going to be on the original playoff roster. He kind of struggled, in the latter half of the season, but he did have the ability to give length if you need it. He also had some postseason experience to bring to the table. So I guess I was a little surprised they decided to do that and bring up Evan Phillips, but I'm with you. I think Evan Phillips was, clearly the better option down the stretch. He even, he's able to give you a little bit of length. I don't think he'd give you 3 or 4 innings, but he could give you 2 innings if you need it. So I think he's worthy of a roster spot. He pitched really well. I don't expect to see him in like the highest of leverage situations, but if that's like your low leverage guy that you need to get 2 innings from to close out like a 9-2 game or something like that,
and I
like
think
you're
he
not
gives
in
you
a
a
bad
different
spot.
look as well. He's not throwing upper 90s with his fastball. He's relying on a really pretty nasty breaking ball. And so when you throw him before or after a guy like Joe Kelly or, having seen Blake Trinan in the series or whatever, it's just a different look, which we know the Dodgers are fans of. And then Brule, obviously, like we said, makes sense. The Braves have struggled to hit left-handed pitching, so you knew they were going to want a left-hander besides Alex Vesia that they trusted. So no surprise there. But that was the Price thing. I think that was what was working in his favor, is that he was left-handed. Clearly, they liked Phillips, despite the platoon stuff, better. Looking on the offensive side, let's talk about this lineup. I wouldn't say any major surprises if you realize that a left-handed pitcher was on the mound. You have Mookie Betts and Trey Turner, number 1 and 2, Corey Seager batting 3rd, Justin Turner batting 4th, Will Smith batting 5th, Pujols and Pollock, Chris Taylor, and then Corey Knebel, as we said. So Pujols and Pollock, kind of the 2 big surprises, if you will. But against a left-handed pitcher, I think you would expect Bellinger out of the game. And, Gavin Lux, I don't know. I wish Gavin Lux was in the lineup, personally. But I understand those decisions. If you want to talk other things that are interesting, Justin Turner moving up in the lineup to the 4th spot is an interesting move to me. Corey Seager against the lefty, moving from the 2-hole to the 3-hole. Now, he had reverse splits, I believe, so he actually hit better against lefties. But what did you make of the lineup? Any not to micromanage it or overanalyze it, but any surprises for you at looking at this lineup?
I don't think there was any huge surprises. I think, Cody Bellinger and Gavin Lux, they're not in the lineup against the lefty, but we're going to see them in this game. Like Pujols and Pollock will probably get their 2 at-bats or whatever, maybe 3, depending on how long Fried goes. And then probably later in the game, we'll see Cody and Lux in there. I think the Pujols thing is really a no-brainer. Like, he's mashed lefties all year. You definitely want him in there. So I guess the other question is Pollock or Lux, like you're saying. They went with, the correct platoon advantage over the hot hand. We'll see how it works out. I feel like AJ Pollock is a guy you're going to need him like to get through this postseason run. And I know he was kind of relegated to the bench towards the end of last series, but those were must-win games. Like game 1, it's not a must-win game. I think you could afford to send him out there. Hopefully, hey, if he gets back on track, that'd be huge. Like, this is a guy who basically carried the Dodgers for a long period of time in the second half of the season. And I know he's had his postseason woes, but I don't think you could just relegate him to the bench for good. Like, you're going to need him, whether it be starting games, coming off the bench. So hopefully you throw him in the lineup today against a lefty, which historically he's hit lefties well, and you just hope he can
Justin
kind of
Turner
get
batting
going there.
fourth. I mean, we talked 2 games ago about moving him down in the lineup. He goes from fifth to fourth. He jumps over Will Smith in this scenario. You mentioned a guy like Pujols who has mashed lefties. That would be another one that it feels like maybe you move him up in the lineup just so that he gets as many at-bats as possible before Fried is out of the game. Like, does any of that matter to you, or do you just kind of not think about it too much?
I mean, I guess we'll see. I probably would have just left Smith in the 4 hole, but I know he hasn't really hit lefties all that well this season. Like, he's mashed righties, so that's probably why they moved him down a little bit. They even against Alex Wood in the first series, they moved him all the way down to the 8 spot when a lefty was on the mound. But Justin Turner, it's no secret he's been struggling this postseason. So maybe this is kind of Dave Roberts like wanting to show confidence in him, hoping to get him going too. I don't know if there's a better option up there in the 4 hole. I think Pujols, ironically enough, would be the best option just because of how well he's hit lefties.
But then you've got Cody Bellinger batting in the 4 hole the rest of the game.
Right, exactly, and that could get tricky too because if Corey Seager's batting third, then there's 2 lefties in a row right there. The Braves could easily go to one of their lefty relievers or whatever. So I don't make too much of it. Ideally, Justin Turner's not batting fourth right now just because of how much he's been struggling, but I also don't think the other options are like a whole lot better.
We've had stretches of the lineup where you look at it and you look at the 6, 7, 8 holes and you're like, geez, like, what are we going to do? I mean, Pujols, Pollock, and Taylor is still an unbelievable 6, 7, 8. Again, Chris Taylor has been struggling. He's been hitting the ball hard on one hand, but he keeps hitting it to the warning track and not over the fence. And so you still like sort of the overall approach and the overall contact that Chris Taylor is making. And so it'll be an interesting one. I mean, offense has been the question. They won this last series, but they scored, less than, they got shut out twice and scored 2 runs in game 5. So the flip side is their pitching, what nobody really talked about, how bad the Giants were offensively, which is a large credit due to the Dodgers pitchers. Well, before we get to some predictions and stuff, let's get to some questions. CK's got a question in here about the rotation. Does this mean that Urias only gets game 4 and that the bullpen gets game 1 and game 5? This was kind of the decision to be made. Whoever pitched tonight, and if you use bullpen as sort of a placeholder name, whoever pitched tonight was also going to pitch game 5. Whoever pitched game 4 was likely only going to pitch game 4. It seems like that makes sense. So I think to answer your question, yes, Urias only gets game 4. Yes, there will be 2 bullpen games. The interesting piece will be, how do they use Urias out of the bullpen? Do you have any predictions for do you think do we see Urias before game 4? Or do they just pitch him in game 4 and then have him available in game 6 and game 7?
I think it's definitely a possibility we see him before game 4 in a bullpen role. I think in a perfect world, you go out and you win a couple big ones and you don't have to do that and he gets enough time off for his next start. But if it's a close game, you got a bullpen game today. I don't know if you go to Julio today just because you got everyone else available. But if it's kind of a Johnny Holstaff day today, then tomorrow, who knows, maybe some guys are down or maybe you're not as comfortable going to them. And I know it's going to be Max Scherzer pitching, so you hope he could go deep. But, I think Julio could give you an inning tomorrow if you need it, and that would be kind of his natural bullpen day to get ready for that game 4 start. And then, like you said, he's definitely going to be available to come out of the bullpen if there's a game 7. Like, I don't think there's any question about that. So, yeah, even though Julio's only making 1 start in this series, he's still going to impact multiple games. Unless ideally the Dodgers come out and just play really well and they don't need him to. That would be great too. If he could just make that game 4 start and nothing else. But he'll definitely be available in other games. And that's kind of the ultimate weapon, right? Because you don't know, is he going to be used early in a game? Is he going to close a game? You feel comfortable putting him in at any time. So that's going to be huge.
Any chance we see Julio out of the bullpen tonight, in your estimation? 2 days ago, 50 pitches.
I think it's possible. I think it's definitely possible. I mean, you're going to be running through relievers early. I don't know. I guess it kind of depends on what Gonsolin could give you. Like if Gonsolin gives you 3 innings, like you said, then you probably don't need Julio because you got a bunch of other guys that could give you innings as well. But it's kind of like a situation like game 5 where, you use a bunch of guys in the beginning and then you go to Trinan and Kenley kind of early, like the 7th and 8th inning, and then it's a 1-run game going into the 9th and you need someone to close it out. who you going to trust, like Julio or who, the other guys are left. Same thing with when they went to Scherzer in the last game. So I definitely think it's possible if the Dodgers have like a close lead, but if they're losing, we won't see him. And if it's lopsided,
Yeah,
either way,
this
we
is
definitely
something
won't
I'm
see
kind
him.
of learning on the fly is like, how do these come appearing out of a bullpen? Like, how does that mess with you, right? Because technically Scherzer would have been on full rest and everyone's like, oh, he can pitch game 5. It's his bullpen day. Well, he threw the bullpen and clearly wasn't ready for today's game, which would have been the best case scenario if he could have started today as far as looking ahead. And so it's interesting to sort of see, like, does that, in Scherzer's case, it appears that it is bumping his normal schedule back by 1 day. He will pitch tomorrow, which I believe would have been his 6th day, so an extra day of rest, technically, but with that bullpen appearance. And so is that the same case for Julio? Julio, on the flip side, threw only 70 pitches in his first appearance in the NLDS and 50, I believe, in his second appearance. So it's just fascinating to see how his arm holds up in a very abnormal schedule. Then you got Buehler in game 3. I like that he's going to get some extra rest, having been on short rest his first appearance. And then he, of course, would be available for game 7 to start that one if they needed it. So fascinating to see how that plays out. But I think some interesting stuff there. Go Sato has a question from Tokyo, Japan. So shout out to Tokyo, Japan. Wants to know, do you think Gonsolin is essentially the second guy in after Knebel? It's an interesting question because with the Julio piece, you went righty and then switched to a lefty. If Gonsolin is your bulk guy, the idea of opening with a right-hander is kind of an interesting dynamic because you're not getting the platoon advantage. So is the Knebel move just to get the top of the lineup and theoretically the best 3 or 4 hitters that the Braves have against one of your best relievers? And do you see Gonsolin? Like, I'm asking you 2 separate questions here, but what's the thought process behind an opener if your bulk guy throws with the same hand? And do you think Gonsolin's the second guy out of the bullpen?
That's a good question. I honestly think the fact that they are going with a righty opener kind of shows that this is probably just a bullpen game. Like, I don't know if they're planning on getting like a whole lot of length out of Gonsolin. Like, if he could give you like 2 innings, like, great. But this isn't a case like the other night where, Julio pitched 4. I think they were hoping to get 5 out of him. Like, I don't think they're hoping to get anywhere close to that from Gonsolin. I think this is more of just a straight bullpen game. They'll play the matchups. It looks like the Braves kind of stacked the top of their lineup with some lefties. I know Jock's batting 5th, so at some point, that's probably where we'll see Justin Brule try to get him in there to get an AB against Jock, who, as we all know, historically doesn't hit lefties well. They got some other guys in there that don't hit lefties well. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's like Knebel and then another like maybe Gratterall again, just go the same thing, and then trot out Brule in the 3rd inning for the top of the Braves lineup or whatever. And once you get past that, then maybe you go to Gonsolin for the bottom of the lineup and then hope maybe he could get around once or whatever, depending on how things go. But I don't think this is really a case of, just Knebel and then straight to Gonsolin. I definitely think we're going to see at least
looking
one
at the
guy
Braves
in
lineup,
between.
they have 2 lefties at the top, Rosario and Freeman. Albies is batting 3rd. He's a switch hitter. Jock Peterson, the only other lefty in there, and he's protected by Riley ahead of him and Duvall after. So they've clearly set that up so that you can't throw a lefty in there just against Jock Peterson, because if a lefty faces Duvall, that's probably going to spell trouble. The other piece is Freddie Freeman is one of those lefties, and look, you're not going to feel comfortable if Freddie Freeman's up regardless of what hand your pitcher throws with. So it will be interesting to see how they navigate some of that stuff. Obviously, if Jock Peterson comes up with 2 outs, then maybe you take your chances with a Vesia or a Brule, hoping that you can get that out there. But the Braves don't strike me nearly as platoon friendly as the Giants. Like, they're not going to be subbing half of their lineup out every time a pitcher changes and we get a different side there. So something to pay attention to there. We had one other question, and it's we got a couple minutes left, and I haven't thought too deeply about it, but I apologize because I can't figure out who asked this question. But here we go. Abe asked, who do you want to face in the World Series if we were to get past the Braves? Nobody's writing that off, but it's a question and it's there. I'll say this: I dislike both teams. Like, there's probably not 2 teams in the American League I like less. Obviously, it's not too hard to figure out why. I would probably face the Red Sox if I could, just because I want the worst things in the world for Astros fans. Like, the idea that they would make a World Series, the idea that they would have a chance of winning a World Series, I want none of that. Obviously, the Red Sox, I like Kike, I like Verdugo. It would suck to have to play against those guys, but I don't know. I think the Dodgers are better than both those teams. I mean, the Red Sox are worse of the 2. Also, I think the Red Sox are a much less scary rotation, lineup, bullpen, etc. So I'd take the Red Sox. What about you?
I guess I'm kind of the opposite, but for like the same reasons. Like I feel the same way as you do. I think the Dodgers are better than both teams. I don't. The Astros rotation doesn't really scare me at all. Especially, I mean, Lance
Yeah.
McCullers is out right now. Who knows? Maybe he would be back for the World Series. He's the one guy who I guess would
Yeah.
you'd get scared of a little bit. But without him, that rotation you're not scared of at all. I kind of I want to face the Astros. Like I want to beat them once and for all. Send them home, make them feel the way we felt in 2017. So I kind of want that. With that being said, though, like I can't bring
Yeah.
myself to like root for the Astros in these games. Like when I'm watching these ALCS games, I wouldn't say I'm rooting for the Red Sox, but there's definitely like part of me that would rather see them win. Kind of the same reason for you. Like at the end of the day, I want
Yeah.
to see the Astros suffer. So whether that, I think the ultimate form of suffering would be
Yeah.
us beating them, and that's why I want that. But them losing in the ALCS, like that's still a nice form of suffering. So I'm good either way. I'd rather
Yeah.
just focus on the Dodgers right now. Like let's get there
Viralocity
first, and
makes
then
a
we
good
can worry
point. The
about
Red
that.
Sox, if the Red Sox were to come out of the American League, the Dodgers would have home field advantage. That's the one scenario in which the Dodgers. Oh, both of them. Okay,
Both
so
both
there you
of
go.
them.
There you
Both
go.
of them.
And Red Sox, as
Yeah.
CK points out, Red Sox are currently winning 9-3 with 2 outs in the bottom of the eighth. They were up 9-0 like right off the bat. So,
They hit
and did
two
Kike
grand
got another
slams in
home
the
run? Is
first
that
two
right?
innings. And
Jeez
then
Louise.
Kike hit us. Yeah,
Unconscious.
Kike is
So there you go.
unconscious right
There you
now. He's
go.
on fire.
But yeah, lots needs to happen between now and then. I did say at one point, if they were to face the Astros and somehow win the World Series, think about sort of the revenge tour that this would have been. The Cardinals, who, if you've been a Dodger fan at any point in the last 15 years, I mean, that's probably the team that you liked the least in like 8 to 10 years ago, and then to beat the Giants, who that goes without saying. The Braves are the only one that I don't really have beef with, although they have beaten us in the playoffs a number of times.
Definitely.
And then to go through the Astros, if that's how it played out, Red Sox or Astros, really, but specifically the Astros, I mean, it would just check every box of just an absolutely epic run. So there we go. Well, let's make some predictions for today, as we always do. How about this? I'm going to throw a curveball at you here, Daniel. I want a score prediction. That's the obvious one. Give me like an MVP of the game, and then maybe make one other prediction. So we've made predictions for pitching stat lines. We've made predictions for how many home runs the team's going to hit. So score line, MVP of the game, and then just one other prediction. Take your pick.
All right. I think it's going to be a little higher scoring game today. We've seen a lot of low scoring games in the playoffs so far, but I think it's time for the offense to kind of get going. I know Max Fried's really good, but the Braves bullpen, on the other hand, is not that good. So I think the Dodgers, they might fall behind early. But my big prediction is a nice come from behind victory, maybe 3 runs in the 8th or 9th inning, steal a nice little 7-6 victory in game 1. And I guess for offensive MVP, I'll say Justin Turner gets going. It's about time. He hasn't done anything this whole postseason. Like I was saying earlier, Dave showed confidence in him by sticking him in that 4 spot, and I think he's going to come through with the big
so your
hit
third
late
prediction
to
is
win
just
it.
that it's a come from behind, a few runs late in the game. That's the element. Okay, so Daniel likes 7-6. If you're a betting person, the line on this one is 8 runs, I believe, is the total. So Daniel says you're going to have a comfortable victory there if you want to go that route. I think this will be. I think the Dodgers will win. I do agree with you. I think, although I think it's going to be on the low scoring side. I just think the Dodger bullpen is really good. I think the Braves score 2 runs. I think the Dodgers get 4. So I'll go 4-2 Dodgers. I like to throw a curveball with my MVP. So I'm gonna say AJ Pollock. AJ Pollock, a couple big hits from him. I know he's taken some flack. He did get a single in Game 5 in his pinch hit at bat. So I'm gonna say AJ Pollock is the MVP. And then as far as a prediction goes, I'm going to say we get, part of me wants, I'm going to say 3 innings from Tony Gonsolin tonight. I think we get 3 scoreless innings from Tony Gonsolin. How about that? There's a prediction for you. 3 scoreless innings from Tony Gonsolin. That's my prediction. Looking in the chat real quick, THP's got 4-3 Braves, unfortunately. Hey, you know what? Matt Moreno's part of our team. We appreciate honesty. We appreciate non-biased predictions. So there you go. Andrew McDaniels plays it safe. He says Turner MVP, so that's nice. You just say Turner MVP. You kind of give yourself some fling there. He also says Bellinger 2-run jack. Yair says 6-3 Dodgers. MVP is the bullpen home run by Justin Turner. Let's see. Viralocity, Trey Turner with the home run. He goes 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs. Aeronetic says Justin can't go 2 series in a row in a slump. Abe says Trey Turner bomb. Andrew says Mookie 3-hit game. So he's predicting a slump for Mookie Betts coming off of a 4-hit game. He's going to start to regress to just 3 hits in a game. So there we go. Aeronetic, X factor is Lux. He's not starting, so he could easily make an impact late in the game. But we'll see. But the thing with him is he's not really going to be a defensive sub. So he would probably be an offensive sub, but you're probably looking at maybe 1 at bat. I mean, because Pollock, the thing on Pollock too is he doesn't have bad splits. Like Pollock can hit righties and lefties just about the same. So Sergio says Pujols home run, 5-4 Dodgers. Lost at 7-7. Also says Pujols stinger. He says I'm going to keep saying it until it happens. So there you go. Hopefully tonight is the night. So there we go. Daniel and I are going to be with you live post game tonight. Obviously, this game. First pitch is 3 minutes away, so we're almost there. We'll be live with you as soon as it ends. So invite your friends. Join us over at Dodger Blue 1958 on the YouTube channel. We appreciate you joining us. We'll end as we always do with the words of Vince Scully, and we'll see you post-game. Thanks for joining.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.